This is Aaron Edwards with Santos Springs. Welcome to this week's edition of the Friday Field Report, South America. Man, there's headlines all over the place. We're going to sort through some of those and just itemize the big picture stories as we go over this. There's a saying in Brazil that after today's video might make a little bit more sense, but the saying goes, the translation would be something like, Brazil is not for beginners. And a lot of the challenges that we're going to discuss today are tied to just some of the challenges of doing business in Brazil. Every environment has their own challenges. Brazil certainly has challenges as well. So we're going to go over those as well as what are potentially some market implications. The first headline I wanted to comment on was actually one of our customers pointed it out this week. He beat me to it, but a lot of you probably saw the headline that Cargill has stopped shipping soybeans out of Brazil. In a nutshell, what happened was there was a change of government policy on the way grain inspections were supposed to be carried out. And there were delays on being able to meet that government obligation right in the midst of harvest, in the midst of that hassle. So they paused the buying and they're sorting that out, just so that if there's going to be inspection delays, it's very expensive to keep ships docked and paying, logistically, it's very expensive if you're going to get held up at the inspection phase. So they've actually paused purchases inland on soybeans, which, just think about, picture the US, if a company like Cargill says, okay, we're not buying from farmers anymore. So there are ripple effects to that as well. So there's impacts on origination from these hiccups, and then there's the problem solving of figuring out a streamlined way to have these inspections. And the headline, allegedly there's pressure from China on the Brazilian government to meet a standard of inspections that is a higher bar. But just in the midst of harvest, with all of the geopolitical tension going on and all of those, it's a tricky situation. Will it impact markets? Well, if you do limit the exports of soybeans out of Brazil, it does hurt Brazil and help Chicago. So it's potentially bullish. I think it'll be ironed out. Again, Brazil is not for beginners. I'm sure it's taking away someone's sleep, but it'll probably get ironed out eventually in one way or another. The second headline, very much in line with that, prices of diesel fuel have spiked. Just in a farmer group chat that I'm in, they were just sharing their pricing. And if you translate it, we're talking of $5 a gallon diesel fuel. One, including the farm delivery, had to pay over like $6.40 for a gallon of diesel fuel. Brazil it's all the same grade diesel fuel. They don't have, the farm grade like we do here. So, it's just right in the middle of harvest, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and double crop corn planting. This is the time of year where the most diesel fuel is used, and it just absolutely spikes up. So their cost of production has just taken a huge spike up, and selling the grain is got harder. Nitrogen is going up. The nitrogen has not impacted them as much on this crop, because by the time we started seeing nitrogen spike, most of them already had the nitrogen delivered to their properties. Most of the nitrogen goes on as urea, just powder, broadcast urea. But again, diesel fuel spiking, hiccups at the export port. Then let's talk about crop progress. So the soybean harvest is real close to 50% this week. They're tipping the scale on 50% this week, and that's just right on pace, a few percentage points ahead of pace. There's widespread rains north to south, but they've generally been able to get in and out of the field, harvesting some higher moisture levels. It's a challenging harvest, but they're getting the work done. The other bit is safrinha corn planting. 3/4 of the safrinha corn plant is done. They're ahead of the 5-year average, below last year. Last year, by this week, they were already over 80% planted. The important bit of that is we are seeing this window close, but by the time we get next week's number, I'm guessing the safrinha corn planting will be something over 80%. So even if there are acres planted out of the window, it's what, 10% of the acreage? You know, we'll see the number next week, but it's a smaller percentage of the acreage, a less consequential percentage of the acreage. So from a field work standpoint, soybean harvest is halfway done. They're being able to pick the beans. It's logistically challenging, and fuel prices are high, but they're getting the work done. On the corn, they're ahead of the 5-year average. It's looking like the risk of delayed corn planting, reduced acreage, reduced yields. It looks like that risk is pretty much behind us on the double crop corn for them. Now, planting isn't a guarantee of raising a crop, and a lot of these acres have gone in it started off delayed, so they're going in at the later part of the window. So if rains shut off early, there could still be weather concerns. I mean, there's still weather risk, but it's planting. They basically are going to get, it looks like they're going to get basically all the crop planted within the window or pretty close to it, maybe a week late. So let's say we covered the export story, the diesel story, planting progress. To wrap it up, rainfall. The northern part of Brazil there's adequate rainfall north to south. If you get down to southern Brazil, the state of Paraná, it's starting to get dry. It has been a little bit dry. There's not much in the way of rain forecasted for this upcoming week. I've not heard from many customers that farm down there a concern yet, but it's getting dry, and that's a big double crop corn state. So there could be a dryness story there. We'll see how that progresses. Farther south, still in the Pampas region, you would have both in Argentina as well as in Brazil, they're on the dry side. So it's a critical developmental phase for corn and soybeans in that region. They don't do double crop corn. It's just a single crop. They plant soybeans a little bit later. So those beans are developmentally later. They're developmentally critical, and they're coming into some dryness. Will it be enough to be a crop loss weather story? I'm not convinced that there's crop loss yet. And even if there is it a big enough percentage of all of South America's production to weigh down on markets, or will it be less consequential? Time will tell, but it's not likely a big enough story to be bullish. We're talking maybe 10% of Brazil's cropland and a little bit higher percentage of Argentina. So it is a significant area, but we're having good yields up north, and there's plenty of availability of grain right now. So, you know, will it drop the average yield in Brazil a little bit? Maybe, but will the market feel it? Less clear. And just to put numbers to it, let's say that 10% of the crop has a 10% yield loss. We're talking 1% off the average, even if a national average, even if it's a 30% yield loss in that region, it's 3%. We might start feeling that, but it's not a huge deal as of right now, which brings us to our final point. CONAB was supposed to put out their monthly report, but that's actually coming out at 7 Central. It's coming out 7 Central, Friday the 13th is when that should be published. So that'll be news for next week. We'll be able to compare side by side between the CONAB report and the USDA report. I hope you have a great rest of your day, great weekend, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have grain marketing questions.